So lesson 3-4 is on solving equations by multiplying and dividing. All right, last lesson we solved equations by adding or subtracting, okay? Our rules are going to stay fairly the same with this lesson. Our objectives are going to be the same in any type of equation that we solve. So our number one goal is to get the variable by itself. That's what we talked about last lesson, okay? And in order to get the variable by itself, we need to understand what is happening to the variable so then we can perform the opposite operation, okay? Performing the opposite operation cancels out whatever number is with that variable, so that gets the variable by itself. And then whatever I do to one side, we got to do the other side of the equal sign. So our process in solving the equation will stay the same regardless of what strategy we are using, okay? So here I have 3 and x. They're right next to each other. So I want to get this variable by itself. In order to do that, we need to get rid of this 3. All right, so in order to get rid of it, we need to understand, well, what is happening to the x? Well, if 3 and x are right next to each other, that means they're being multiplied. 3 is being multiplied by x. So the exact opposite of multiplying is to divide. So 3 is being multiplied by x. In order to get rid of the 3, we need to divide both sides by 3. All right, whatever I do to one side, I got to do the other. And see how I'm showing you division? I'm writing it kind of like a fraction form, and that's going to help you out later on. So I encourage you to show that you're dividing like I'm doing right here. Now, 3 divided by 3, all right? We can kind of cancel those out. They both really become a 1, right? And 1x is just x anyway, so really we got x by itself. We canceled out the 3's. 3 over 3 is 1 over 1, which is just 1. And then 1x is just x. So we got x by itself by dividing both sides by 3. Now, since we are multiplying and dividing, we have to pay attention to our signs. Okay, same signs when I multiply and divide, my answer is a positive. If I am multiplying and dividing numbers that have different signs, my answer is negative. So here I have negative 15 divided by 3. My signs are different, so I know my answer is negative. 15 divided by 3 is 5, so x equals negative 5. Okay, next example here, this says y divided by negative 6 equals negative 7. So we need to get this y by itself. All right, in order to do that, we need to understand what's happening to it. It is being divided by negative 6. The exact opposite of dividing by negative 6 is to multiply by negative 6. And I'm showing that I'm multiplying this side by negative 6 with this dot, right? Because that's a way to show multiplication. And the reason I put that negative 6 up there is we want to think about this y over 6 as negative 1/6. Because if I multiply by negative 6 or negative 6 over 1, right, these negative 6's really cross-reduce and cancel out. Now, everything here is 1, right? So I can cross-reduce those negative 6's. They become 1. And 1 times y, again, is just y. So we canceled out our negative 6. Negative 6 is by multiplying both sides by negative 6. So I took my left side times negative 6, so I also need to take this right side times negative 6. All right. Negative 7 times negative 6, positive 42. I had the same sign, so my answer was positive when I was multiplying. All right. All right, next example. Negative w equals 17. Okay, well, what we talked about is if a variable is by itself, how many w's do you really see? Well, we see 1 w, so I would encourage you to put a 1 here so you can see kind of what number is being multiplied by that w. So it's really kind of saying negative 1 times w, all right? So if there's a variable by itself, there really is a 1 as a coefficient in front of it. So if we get this w by itself, we need to ask ourselves what's happening. It's being multiplied by negative 1. The opposite of multiplying is to divide, and we need to get rid of that negative 1, so I need to divide by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. And now I really have w by itself. 1w is just w, right? And then if I take that left side divided by negative 1, I need to take this right side divided by negative 1. 17 divided by negative 1 is negative 17. All right. Here, the n is on the right side. That's okay. We still focus on what's happening to the side of the variable. So now we're going to shift our attention to this right side right away. Well, n, what's happening to n? It's being multiplied by negative 1 5/10. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide by negative 1 5/10 and divide by negative 1 5/10. So our negative 1 5/10, they're going to cancel each other out. I have n by itself. Now we just need to take 3 divided by negative 1 5/10. Now the reason I've asked you to set the problem up like this is because we've learned in chapter 2, when I have a fraction and we're trying to divide, because that's what we're doing, to get our answer, all right, we're going to have to set it up long division. And this helps us see, hey, okay, I have the top number here, bottom number here, numerator, denominator. So I know now, because of chapter 2, what number to put on the inside. So I put the top number always on the inside, and our bottom number goes on the outside. Now we've learned that we do not really want to divide by a decimal, so we need to get this decimal and move it over. Okay, we don't want to have a decimal there, we want that decimal to be at the end. So I'm going to move it over, and now that 1 5/10 becomes 15. There was our decimal there, so if I move this one spot to the right, I need to move this one spot to the right. We add our 0, our decimal is now here, and then we need to just bring it straight up. Now we ask ourselves, how many times does 15 go into 30? 15 goes into 30 2 times. 2 times 15 is 30, perfectly. And then we have to go back and make sure we have the right positive or negative sign in our answer. My signs here were different, positive 3, negative 1 5/10. Different signs when I divide, negative, and then 2. So n equals negative 2. All right, last example. So if I have a fraction now right next to a variable, that does mean they're being multiplied. Okay, so I have a negative 4/5 times x equals negative 8. So we need to solve for x. So we need to ask ourselves, what's happening to our variable x? Well, it's being multiplied by negative 4/5. So usually, since something is being multiplied, to do the opposite, we would divide. But if I divided by negative 4/5, we've talked about in the last chapter, we don't like to divide by fractions. So instead of dividing by a fraction, we said that we multiply by the reciprocal, right? So if we take the reciprocal of something, we just flip it, right? So I have a negative 4/5. So I'm going to try to get rid of this negative 4/5. I need to do the exact opposite of that. So we need to, okay, in this case, we're not going to divide, even though it is being multiplied, and the exact opposite of multiplying is division. We don't like to divide by a fraction, okay? So if we ever have a fraction being multiplied by a variable, we're not going to divide, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 4/5, we just need to flip that fraction, is negative 5/4. And if I take this side times negative 5/4, I need to take this side times negative 5/4. So let's go back to this left side. Remember when we multiplied fractions, we want to look to cross reduce. Well, a negative 5 and negative 5, I can cross those out. They both become 1. 4 and 4, they both become 1. So really, I have just 1 here. 1x is just x. So I crossed out and canceled the negative 4/5. So I have x all by itself. And now I have negative 8 times negative 5/4. Now, if this is a fraction, we need to make that negative 8 look like a fraction. So we're going to put it over 1. And we need to just look to cross reduce. Well, I can break down 4 and 8. I can divide both of them by 4. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 8 2 times. All right. I have a negative times a negative, so we know our answer is going to be a positive. 2 times 5 is 10 over 1 times 1 is 1, and 10 over 1 is just 10. All right, homework is on page 106. You're going to do 7 through 27, but just the odd numbers. So 7 through 27 odds.